Happy Saturday, everybody. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's relevant to me and anybody who's into cutting wood, and that is buying a refurbished chainsaw actually worth it? Now, it can be or it cannot be depending upon whether or not you find yourself a reputable builder, and that is really the most important thing you can do. I bought my chainsaw from a guy named Wes in Kentucky, and he is what I'd call a reputable builder. So I will link you his eBay store in the description below so you can check out the saws that he currently has for sale. Now here is mine. This is the old school Husqvarna Model 372 that I bought on eBay from Wes. And, this is one of those, it is, claimed to be refurbished, right? Now, seller claims that it has an OE cylinder assembly. And the way we can tell in the case of a Husqvarna is what we want to look for is markings on the cylinder jug. Now, when I popped this off, I was able to find the term Mahle stamped on the cylinder, M-A-H-L-E, and that's proof that it's OEM. Alright, so we got the cover off. See that? Made in Sweden. He used an OE air filter. And right here, here's what we really want to look for. See the lettering, the Mahle? If this was a highway, China, whatever cylinder, it would not have these markings on the jug. And you can see there's no corrosion. This is clearly a new cylinder. It's very clean even after several hours of use. That boot there looks new. Now this starter is Chinese and this handle is Chinese, but got the original magnesium case, and it's got an original aluminum Swedish-made cylinder. He claims that it has new crank bearings and seals, and while I can't really say for sure without taking the whole saw apart, what I can tell you is that when I cleaned off some of this sawdust and looked way down in there, you might not be able to see it because I got too much sawdust in here now because I've been running this thing hard. But if you look closely, you might be able to see some brand new gasket material hanging out of the crankcase. Like I saw a brand new green gasket. Usually, these paper gaskets get kind of old and ugly and gnarly looking, but this still was, like shiny, I guess you could say. So, being that there is a new crankcase gasket, I have every reason to believe that the saw was split apart. And if you're going to split apart a saw, it doesn't take any time at all to put in new crank seals and crank bearings. They're not that expensive. So, I have reason to believe, based on the fact that the case has definitely come apart, that it has new bearings and seals. And so he put all that in his eBay description. He claimed it had new crank seals, he claimed it had a new cylinder jug, and such like that. And it turns out that his claims were true, which is awesome. You don't always get that when you buy stuff off of eBay. Now, when I got this saw, it was not perfect. Sometimes things happen. Had a defective piston ring. Something was out of spec, something wasn't machined right. But when I ran the saw, it just didn't have any guts, and I did a compression check, and it was only making 125 psi cold, and the auto oiler wasn't working. Sometimes things happen. I reached out to Wes. He said ship it back. So I did, and a week or two later, I got it back, and I did a cold compression check, 145 psi. He sent me a new oiler, so the oiler is working, so that problem is fixed. So I was a little concerned at first. I was thinking, oh shoot, I got a lemon and now I'm just out, $600. But he made good. Wes made good on his promise. He solved the problem. He fixed what he said he was going to fix. And I've been cutting up several oak trees with this, and the only thing that's wrong with it now is my chain is incredibly dull. One strong recommendation is that this is something I put on. That is what's called a dual port muffler. You can find those on eBay. The factory mufflers for the 372 XPs are trash. You got one exhaust port and it's the size of an eraser head. Even when this thing was back up to, proper factory compression, it still was just a gutless wonder. And I was kind of shocked because I thought, oh, the 372 is supposed to be this legendary saw. As soon as I put this muffler on here and dialed in the carburetor, it was an absolute killing machine. So, word for the wise, if you get an old 372, just pony up the 50-60 bucks and put a double muffler on here, because it really does make all the difference in the world. When I bought this, he said that there was a crack in the magnesium housing, and, you know, again, but it's not proved to not be a big deal. But the thing was, he said that before I bought it, so I knew this going in. But again, this is a 20-year-old saw that's been rebuilt, so it's got, you know, it's got some history to it. But when I purchased this saw, everything that he said was right or wrong with it turned out to be true. And once we got the bugs ironed out, again, Wes made good on all of his promises, which is awesome. I highly recommend him. But once I got the bugs kind of ironed out on this power head, you know, I've been putting it through the paces. I've been cutting up oak and pine and just really going at it, taking out tree stumps. And it's really been a workhorse as of late. So I've got several hours on it now, and it's been fantastic. And I've probably got this power head for, if memory serves me well, maybe 600 bucks, I think. Now, if you can find a brand new one of these power heads, they're typically over $1,000. I had to buy the bar separately, but, you know, total, I've probably got about $800 tied up in this saw. And if I went out and tried to buy a brand new one with a good bar, with a chain, and then put, you know, all that good stuff on there, it would have been well over $1,000. I think one of these, the bar and chain right now, is like $1,400. So, you know, I saved about, you know, maybe $500 or $600 in total by buying a refurbished saw. And in my case, it was absolutely worth it, because it runs just as good as a new saw, but it was several $100s cheaper. So I really couldn't be much happier with it. So is it worth buying a quote-unquote refurbished saw? It absolutely is, so long as you have a good builder. And again, I'll leave the link in the description below. Wes was a great person to work with. When I ran into a problem, he did not hesitate to fix it, and that's seems to get harder and harder to find these days, as people don't want to keep their promises, but he absolutely does. So if you're in the market for a chainsaw that's good but also relatively affordable, instead of buying a China one, buy one from Wes. It's absolutely worth your trouble. Until we meet again, stay gold.